Oh, now, yep, here they come. Wonderful. We have 10 attendees. The numbers are going up. This is wonderful. So
What's
I'm
the
going to,
what's the weather
please.
like in Colorado this morning, Mike?
Well, Holly, the weather is very typical for Colorado in one sense. It's sunny and it's clear and it's dry. In another sense, it's worrying because it's so dry and there's been a lot of wind lately. And thanks to climate change, we are more and more increasingly concerned about what these kinds of weather patterns really mean. But if you're the kind of person that needs vitamin D and that sort of thing, this is the place to be because it's just absolutely brilliant sunshine. So I'm going to take the bright side of it this morning.
Well, so folks who are really eager to get outside and spend time outside might have a hard time.
Yes.
This morning, maybe they can take
Yes.
outside. That's what my middle path is sometimes. I'll take
That's
my
a nice idea. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's the temptation is probably going to be too strong for folks on a Saturday morning. So, but we do look like we have at least 20-ish participants who are joining us right now. So that's always encouraging. And I want to welcome everybody. And I guess given the time that we have together and the probably the desire on many people's parts to get on with their day, I think we'll begin now, and as folks roll in, they can kind of pick up wherever they jump in. So I want to introduce Holly Rogers, Dr. Holly Rogers, after I quickly say what we're doing here today and who's responsible for that. My name is Mike Kimball. I'm a professor of anthropology at the University of Northern Colorado. I'm also the director of our very new Center for Contemplative, I can't even say this even though I'm a co-founder of it, the Center for Applied Contemplative Studies here at UNC. And this is an aspect of what we do, trying to create opportunities, create space for people to learn mindfulness, learn more about mindfulness, and discover together the community that we can build around that. So I want to introduce Dr. Rogers here too now. And I also want to say that that Dr. Rogers is here, Holly Rogers is here because of her generosity to share her time with us, and as a representative of the Center for Koru Mindfulness, and she will share more about that as we move ahead. And so I'll just read a little bit of a bio here that I have for Holly, and she can correct or tweak as she sees fit after I've finished with it. Holly Rogers is a mindfulness practitioner and has been for more than 20 years. She co-founded the Center for Koru Mindfulness and is one of the lead developers of the Koru Mindfulness curriculum, which you'll be hearing a lot more about as we move ahead here. She's a psychiatrist at Duke University's Counseling and Psychological Services. And with Duke University Medical Center psychiatrist, Dr. Margaret Maytan, she is co-author of the book, Mindfulness for the Next Generation, Helping Emerging Adults Manage Stress and Lead Healthier Lives. She also is author of a new book, a relatively new book now, the emerging adult-centered book, The Mindful 20-something, a book written directly for the young people in higher education environments who are experiencing so much stress and anxiety right now. So Holly, does that sound, I'll move into the structure of our webinar next, but I want to make sure that that bio sounded okay to you. Does that close enough? Okay, that's great. So Holly's going to lead us through some practice, some mindfulness practice. She's also going to share perspectives on the potential of mindfulness training for addressing the needs of today's Generation C. In other words, all of those young people who have gone through COVID high school, Zoom high school, and are trying to emerge from the darkness, really, of the pandemic. She'll also introduce you to the Center for Koru Mindfulness and its curriculum and teacher training program. I am certified to teach mindfulness through the Center for Koru Mindfulness. So it's an organization and a group of amazing people that are near and dear to my heart. Along with greater familiarity with Koru itself, we intend for you to leave today's webinar with some new or revised and revived tools and perspectives. So here's how it's going to work, everyone. You'll notice on the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A button and a chat button. The chat button goes directly to us, the panelists. If you have any concerns or any technical issues or anything that you feel the need to share with us. The Q&A button is for actual questions that you have for our guest. So you can start entering those as early as you'd like. And then at the end of Holly's presentation, we're going to reserve 15 minutes for that Q&A. So we'll try to get through as many questions as possible in that 15 minutes. So then there'll be 15 minutes left, and the remaining 15 minutes from 11:15 to 11:30 are reserved for an invitation for UNC participants in particular, because we are working on a project at UNC that might bear fruit and offer opportunities for UNC staff and faculty who are interested in pursuing Koru Mindfulness teacher training. So we want to reserve the last 15 minutes for a brief discussion and kind of a little bit of community building around that possibility for UNC folks. So let's see, I guess that's it. I'm going to turn the helm over to Holly Rogers. Thank you again for joining us today, Holly, and I'm excited to move ahead with your presentation.
Thanks, Mike. So thanks for being here, folks. I want to start out by thanking Mike and Trish Jolly, who's not here with us today, but the two of them are responsible for cornering me and bringing me here to Colorado. I was hoping to come in person, but I'm here via Zoom instead, which we're all used to, of course, but not quite as much fun. I'm actually in Durham, North Carolina, where I live. So I want to talk to you a little bit about my path and share what I've learned and we have learned at the Koru Center about teaching mindfulness to emerging adults. And we define emerging adults, or emerging adults are defined as young folks between the ages of about 18 to 30. So I am going to share my screen and go through some slides, and we'll have time to practice as well. So this side's just looking at slides. All right. So as Mike mentioned, I am a psychiatrist and I worked at the Duke Student Counseling Center for many years. And in my capacity as a psychiatrist, I became really aware that a lot of the students who were coming in and that I was seeing were struggling with challenges related to stress management, lack of resilience. Something hard would happen and be really hard for them to get back on their feet. At that point in time, I was already a mindfulness practitioner, and I had this notion that if I could teach these students some mindfulness, it would make a really big difference in their lives. So I set out to start teaching mindfulness. I started running classes, having groups. And what I discovered pretty quickly was that I just wasn't really doing a very good job at it. I could get a few folks to start out with me, and then pretty quickly I'd have maybe half the ones I started. And by the end of the semester, by the end of the year, maybe one or two people had learned a meaningful amount of mindfulness. So I realized that when working with these young folks, a different approach was needed. And I got really curious about how you might go about creating a program that would actually engage them and interest them and motivate them to stick around long enough to learn a meaningful amount of mindfulness. About that time, a psychiatry resident at Duke who was trained in mind-body medicine from the Center for Mind-Body Medicine in Washington, D.C., reached out to me and said she'd like to see about teaching mindfulness to Duke students. And I said, well, that's awesome. I was just about to start trying to figure out a better way to do it. So Margaret Maytan and I got to work experimenting, trying out different strategies for engaging students. And we tried all manner of things. We tried teaching different skills, teaching different meditations, longer classes, shorter classes, putting the students in a circle versus putting them in rows. And over time, we eventually landed on a formula that seemed really effective. We went from having a really hard time getting anyone to come and stay to having long waiting lists of people for our classes, and they would stay to the end and they would tell us at the end, this class changed my life. This was the best class I've taken at Duke. So Margaret and I got kind of excited about that and thought, well, this was a lot of work and there's no point everyone having to reinvent the wheel. So we wrote the book Mindfulness for the Next Generation that described the Koru curriculum. And then sometime later, as there was more interest expressed in learning Koru, another colleague of mine, Libby Webb, who also worked at Duke with me, she helped me start the Center for Koru Mindfulness, where we train people to teach this curriculum that we developed at Duke. We decided to call our curriculum Koru. Koru is the New Zealand Maori word. It means looped or spiraled, and it is a shape that is seen everywhere in New Zealand in the natural world. I lived in New Zealand for a couple years, and I developed just great affection for the culture, the people, and the beautiful flora and fauna. So this symbol also represents harmony or balanced growth around a stable center. And that idea of balanced growth really seemed to represent what we were seeing and hoping to see more of in our young adults. Now, we are very sensitive to concerns that can arise when you borrow symbols or language from another culture. So we've worked with our colleagues in New Zealand, including individuals who identify as Maori, and we have consulted the Waitangi Tribunal Report. It's a document that explores Maori cultural claims. It discusses the use of Maori language and Maori cultural representations. Maori is one of the official languages in New Zealand, and they prohibit the offensive and derogatory public use of their language, art, and other cultural expressions. And we have been reassured that our use of the word Koru is acceptable and is non-derogatory. So let's talk a little bit about what mindfulness is. I'm guessing that if you're here today, you know something about mindfulness. You might even know a lot about mindfulness. So I won't spend too much time on this, but essentially, I think about mindfulness as the practice of paying attention to whatever is going on right now in this moment and bringing this attitude of kindness and curiosity. So it's not a paying attention with judgment, criticism. It's a paying attention with this attitude of, oh, what now? Isn't that interesting? What now? When I work with college students, there is often a fair amount of uncertainty about the difference between mindfulness and meditation. So we like to spend time clarifying the difference. We all have this capacity to be mindful. If you watch a baby or a toddler, it's just beautiful the way they just pay attention to what is happening in the present moment. You can be mindful no matter what you're doing. But unfortunately, as we get older and many things compete for our attention, we get less capable at being really curiously present. And it takes quite a bit of practice to rebuild that capacity. So just like Lifting weights is what you do to build the capacity of your muscles to get stronger. Meditation is what we do to build our capacity to live with mindfulness. And that's what we're doing. We're developing these skills not so that we get good at sitting still for a few minutes at a time. We're developing these skills so that we can go about our life in this really engaged, kind, curious, fully open-hearted way. There are so many different ways you can do meditation. You can do it walking, you can do it seated, you can do Tai Chi, you can do yoga, you can do dishwashing meditation. What matters is that you're harnessing your awareness and you're directing it into the present moment with this attitude of kind curiosity. Now, when we set out to teach college students meditation, the most common thing that we hear is, I can't do it. I can't stop my thoughts. I'm not cut out for it. My thoughts won't stop. I've tried meditation, but I can't do it because I can't stop my thoughts. This is a refrain. And it really comes from this assumption that when we practice meditation, we're trying to stop our thoughts. And then once our thoughts are stopped, then we're going to be all calm and blissful, and then we're meditating. So a metaphor that we use all the time in our very first Koru class, and we refer to it over and over, is this metaphor of our river, our thoughts as a rushing river. When you practice meditation, you are not trying to stop your thoughts. That's a futile and exhausting effort because our brain is going to excrete thoughts. That's what it does. It's wonderful at that. It's great at it. It's not going to stop. If you can get your mind around the fact that your river is going to go, your river is going to flow, we're not trying to stop it, but we are trying to change our relationship to it. So instead of being in the river, washed away by the current, we're trying to climb up on the bank. Take a seat and watch those thoughts go. So can I be curious with a friendly attitude about what's in my river instead of trying to stop it? Now, of course, if you're new to meditation or if you've been doing it for years like I have, what you find is that actually you climb on the bank, you watch a few thoughts, and then you fall back in. You float a while, and then eventually you notice you're in the river and you climb back out. So meditation is often the practice of climbing out, right? You fall in, you climb out, you fall in, you climb out. This is such an important thing for students to understand. They will repeat this to me over and over. I can tell them 5 times this, and then the next day they'll say, gosh, I just can't stop my thoughts. So this idea of relating differently to all of your experience, and especially your busy mind, is such an important concept. All right. So I've been talking a fair amount. Let's do some practice, shall we? Hey, Mike, I have a question for you.
Sure, Holly.
Can y'all see me, or can you only see my slide?
I right now can see your slide, and then over on the right side is a tiny rectangle in which your lovely face is visible.
Okay, so tiny little Holly picture along with a
Yep,
big.
exactly.
Okay, that'll do. All right, thanks, Mike. So let's do some meditation. And one thing that we have learned is really useful is to start out helping people find a useful, helpful way for them to anchor their attention in the present moment. Now, traditionally, the breath is taught as the typical anchor into the present moment, and it's a really useful anchor. Your breath is always present, and it's always changing, so it's a beautiful anchor. And yet, for some people, anchoring their awareness on their breath is unsettling. It feels uncomfortable. It's not helpful for them. So they might prefer other anchors. They might prefer sound, or they might prefer physical sensation. So let's spend a few minutes practicing, and we'll kind of be curious about and play with what's going to be the best anchor for us. All right, so get into a meditation position that is comfortable, so it supports ease, but also supports alertness. So it's helpful to be a little bit upright. Your hands resting in your lap. If you're seated in a chair, your feet on the floor. If you like to close your eyes, if that feels comfortable, you can, or you can leave them open, gazing downward, unfocused. Let's begin with opening our ears to the sounds around us. Open your ears as wide as you can. And just what do you notice? Letting your attention anchor to the sounds in your environment. Now, if your mind wanders, please know that's not a problem. It's not a problem at all. Matter of fact, it is beautiful when you notice your mind has wandered. That's perfect mindfulness. And then you just can go back to your sounds. No big deal. Now let's see what happens if we move our awareness and anchor it on body sensations. Now again, this is entirely optional. If that doesn't feel helpful to you, you can continue listening to sounds. Otherwise, bring your awareness to your feet. Can you feel your feet? Can you feel the places your feet makes contact with the floor? Can you feel the places your body makes contact with your chair? Just noticing those points of pressure. Notice the feeling of your hands in your lap. Perhaps you notice warmth where they make contact with your body, or coolness where the air touches them. If you'd like, you can scan your awareness through your body, noticing what other sensations are prominent. If you notice tightness or tension, you might breathe into that a little bit, see what happens. And if you notice any judgments or criticisms about anything you discover, just notice that you're having those kinds of thoughts and see if you can just re-anchor your awareness on the sensations themselves. Now, if it feels comfortable to you, you can bring your awareness to the flow of your breath. Keeping in mind everybody feels their breath in different places, and on different days, you may feel it in different places. We're constantly changing, but you might notice your belly rising and falling, or your chest rising and falling. Perhaps you notice the air coming out the tip of your nose. Doesn't matter where you experience it, but wherever you find it, see if you can settle your attention there very lightly, like a feather floating on a wave, letting your awareness ride up and down on the flow of your breath. Feeling the inhalation, feeling the exhalation. And again, it's not a problem if your mind wanders, it's just what your mind does. You notice it, that's perfect, beautiful mindfulness. And you return to your breath, back on the bank, watching the river flow. Now, for the last minute or so, I invite you to anchor your awareness to whatever anchor seems most helpful to you in this moment. Sound, sensations, breath. Continue to practice. So I invite you to open your eyes. If it feels good to your body, it can be really nice to stretch. Now I'm curious what you noticed as we did that practice, and I believe you can chat Mike can read your answers. So if you would just put into the chat maybe what you noticed as we did that practice, any observations about what you experienced. And Mike, if any show up, I would love for you to read them out to us.
Great. Maybe they're still bringing themselves to the present moment here. Here we go. My husband cooking lunch in the next room over. Sizzling onions. Sounds like rain.
Wow.
Birds, metal of some sort scraping and a clock ringing. My dryer. Yes, gotta love those appliances. Let's see if anything else is coming in here. Doing this practice put me in touch with feelings of nervousness and sadness.
Wow. So that's a
Yeah.
really beautiful and helpful observation, and I think it speaks to an attitude that is really prevalent about meditation, is that it's supposed to be like a feel good, quick fix. And sometime what we find when we check in is that there are some tender feelings that need our attention and care. Yeah.
We have just relaxing into a space of calm, very settling, birds, finches, and the wind. The birds outside my window. My thoughts were on bringing this practice to my students. I also realized that a body anchor was better for me today than breath.
Beautiful. Thanks, Mike. And thank you all for putting that in. So one thing that I noticed is how many of you found listening to be really engaging. A lot of you were like really like listening. And I'm guessing those onions, not only do they sound like rain, you could probably smell them too. So nothing smells better, right? So that's beautiful. And then that the person who observed that today, the body sensations were more anchoring. And I love the way you worded that, because it sounds like you know that tomorrow that might not be true. And one of the truths of this practice is we're always changing, and we're developing this capacity to be curious and accepting. Today, my breath is hard, but sounds are helpful. Tomorrow, it could be different. Isn't that true of life, right? So thank you. All right, let's talk a little bit about mindfulness and emerging adults. So why mindfulness for young adults? Well, mindfulness is maybe helpful for most of us, but for emerging adults, it's particularly useful. It is a particularly challenging, interesting time of life. And if you want to throw a pandemic into the mix, holy cow. So Jeffrey Arnett is the psychologist who defined this stage of emerging adulthood, folks between ages 18 and 29. And he defined it as a time with 5 pillars that are define the experience of being in your 20s. So you're feeling untethered. Young adults move more, right? They change where they live more times between the ages of 18 and 29 than the whole rest of their lives. They change jobs, they change romantic partners almost as often as they change their shoes, I think. They change romantic. So there's just constant change. They feel in between. If you ask them if they feel like adults, and they have been asked in large surveys, they typically say kind of, sort of, but not really, maybe, no, right? It's a time of focus on the self. What am I going to do? How am I going to support myself? What is my career going to be? And there is so much unknown, so many possibilities. You could do anything. That's terrifying, right? And so much instability. We know that there is pretty much nothing more unstabilizing, anxiety producing than uncertainty. Humans, if you just give us the bad news, we will deal with it. But when we don't know what's going to happen, we feel really anxious. Well, these folks have an entire developmental stage of not knowing. And again, throw the pandemic in, there's just so much uncertainty, which is why there's a lot of unease. And those of us who work with college students, we see this all the time, right? The unease they're sitting with. So in Dr. Arnett's research, they surveyed a lot of emerging adults, and they found 83% said, this time of my life is fun and exciting. And almost as many said, and also, it is stressful. It is full of uncertainty, and I often feel anxious. These are pre-pandemic numbers. I'm guessing if we redid this survey right now, the uncertainty and often feel anxious would be higher, right? So it's a really challenging developmental stage. It's different from other times in our life. And yet, this is data on millennials. Emerging adults tend to be really optimistic, and they really care. They really want to do something meaningful. It's more important to me to have a career that does some good in the world. It's more important that I enjoy my job, that I make a lot of money. I'm not sure the boomers, right, would have said this at this age. Now, we're in a time of transitioning between millennials and Gen Z. They're also known as iGen. And then as Mike pointed out, some people are calling them Gen C because of COVID. But they're the folks who were born between 1996 and 2012, and they're the folks who are in college right now. And they are interesting. They are an interesting group of folks. So they are the most diverse, ethnically diverse generation in American history, which is amazing and wonderful, and gives them a lot of influence. They are digital natives. Technology drives their wish for connection. They live on technology. They understand technology in a way that those of us who didn't grow up with it will never understand it. They have this really entrepreneurial spirit. They don't want to work for someone else. They want to start their own thing. And a lot of them do. They really want to make a difference in the world. Interestingly, they're pretty risk averse. They don't learn to drive as not as many and not as early. They actually have fewer risk-taking behaviors. They have fewer sexual partners than millennials. They are less likely to be involved in drugs and alcohol than millennials. Now, of course, plenty of them are doing these behaviors, and they are the ones that come to our attention. But as a group, this tends to be true for them. They have grown up in a culture of fear, right? And it's impacted them. Now, look at this. This is iPhone-related data. This is from Jean Twenge. She studies Gen Zers or iGeners, and this is a graph of how often students would go out during the week and hang out with friends without their parents, not including their parents. And look how it started to drop off in 2007 when the iPhone was released. So that's interesting. And then look at this. They quit going out. They started spending more time on their phone in 2007, and levels of loneliness and feeling left out, they started to go up. I bet that doesn't surprise any of you, but it kind of breaks my heart every time I look at this data. And it also makes me go, yeah, what are we going to do about this? And then Gen Zs versus millennials. These are rates of depression. Boomers are down there in the orange. The millennials are in the purple. And then look at our Gen Zers. Yeah. So we got to figure it out. They got to figure it out. We got to help them. It is my belief and my experience, actually, that helping these young folks re-engage, not just with their technology, but with themselves, with the present moment, with actual humans, with their experience, can shift this. And it really feels to me like helping them develop some of the capacities that mindfulness teaches is perhaps an antidote to some of this. Now, I'm not naive. I'm not one of these folks who says, oh yeah, learn a little mindfulness, it'll fix everything. But I think it can make a difference, particularly when we start to plant a lot of seeds. And at the Koru Center, we are really interested in planting a lot of seeds and seeing if we can get them to sprout. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the benefits of mindfulness. Again, I'm guessing that y'all know about these things, but I just want to talk briefly about things that are relevant, particularly to emerging adults, folks from college campuses, and also perhaps are relevant to the folks on college campuses who have the money, who control the funds that can be used for wellness and health resiliency behaviors. So that's a few things that I just want to make sure everyone's aware of. So mindfulness training improves working memory capacity and GRE performance while reducing mind wandering. So in this study, GRE reading comprehension increased by 16% after only 2 weeks of mindfulness training. It correlated with reduced mind wandering, and there was a specific effect of improved working memory capacity. Now, this is a very well done study, very clearly shows the improvement in academic performance for folks who have some mindfulness training. That's why this is really relevant for folks on college campuses. So working memory is that part of our mind that takes in information and holds it, manipulates it, and is able to then use it when you're in an exam the next day or when you're at a job interview and people ask you about it. So this ability to expand our working memory, to expand our capacity to input information and work with it is really key and seems to be really related to helping people improve their test scores as well as helping them maintain their focus. Now, resiliency. I'm sure y'all are talking about resiliency wherever you are. This is like with our Gen Zers, one of the things we're seeing is they don't have a lot of resiliency. If something bad happens, they have a really hard time bouncing back from it, right? So this was a study that it was done at Florida State, and it looked at academic self-efficacy and positive reappraisal. These are two qualities that help students bounce back. They're related to resiliency. And positive reappraisal is specifically this process by which something stressful happens and you reconstrue it as benign or valuable or beneficial. So in this study, they assessed intrinsic mindfulness, so the level of mindfulness that these students had. And then they gave them a test that was just a basic information. How many circles in the Olympic rings? Where does the sun rise? What hand does the Statue of Liberty hold their torch in? Things like that, things that most people kind of know. And then regardless of how well the students did, they told them they failed. Which is, social psychologists are messing with people all the time. It must be fun to be a social psychologist. So they told the students they failed. And then they measured their sense of self-efficacy and their capacity for positive reappraisal. And what they found is that there was a very clear link between intrinsic mindfulness and the student's ability to kind of go, oh, gosh, I thought I knew that. Well, guess I didn't, and sort of roll with it and move on. And students with lower levels of mindfulness had a lot of recrimination, felt really bad about it, had a lot of stress and worry about it. So it's really interesting to see how just this capacity for present moment awareness cultivates acceptance, right? Like, oh, okay, that's what happened. Maybe I'll go look up where the sun rises. I thought I knew that. So this is really an important point. So this next point is also really important. Stereotype threat. If I could see you in person, I would ask how many of you are familiar with stereotype threat. So stereotype threat is an actual decline in performance that an individual experiences when he or she is aware of a negative stereotype about themselves even when they know that it's not true, even when they don't believe that it's true. Now, stereotype threat plays a significant role in the so-called achievement gap. And it has been shown to show up in all sorts of places. It's been measured in research commonly in women taking math tests. It is activated by the environment. So for example, you can activate stereotype threat in Black students by having them on a campus where the professors are all white, all the statues of our white people, all the images. At Duke, we have all the paintings of the founders. They're all these stern-looking white men. What you're teaching them is all about, white scholars and scientists. You can activate stereotype threat, and you can show very clearly that the performance of students of color declines when you activate stereotype threat. So this is a study about, can you use mindfulness to diminish stereotype threat? Because if you can diminish it, you can get rid of the performance gap that stereotype threat creates. So this was a study looking at women taking math tests. And in one group, they activated the stereotype threat by saying to the women, we're giving you a test to see why women are worse at math than men. So just by saying that, you can activate this decline in performance. The other group, they didn't say that to them. And then they taught half of them mindfulness, and the other half didn't learn mindfulness. So there were 4 different groups. But what they found is the women who had the stereotype threat activated and didn't learn mindfulness had a significantly lower score on their math test than the women who did have the stereotype threat activated but learned mindfulness. And by learning mindfulness, they did a 5-minute mindfulness exercise before they took the exam. It was simple. And those women had the same score as the women who didn't have stereotype threat activated. So what they showed is by just teaching a little bit of mindfulness, you can work with these cultural currents that are depressing the capacity of some of our most valued members of our community. This is something that we should all be paying attention to. Now, just a little bit of data on Koru. So Koru is only 4 weeks long, and it's only 4 weeks long because that's how long students would go to a mindfulness class. We tried 5 weeks, we tried 6 weeks. When we would leave it at 4 weeks, on the evaluation, the most common response was, this class was too short, it should be longer. And then when we made it 5 weeks, they didn't show up for the 5th week. So we'd go back to 4 weeks and they'd say, no, this should be longer. So Koru is 4 weeks to make them leave wanting more. But so it's a real question. Can you take college students, teach them 4 weeks of mindfulness and have a meaningful impact? And we needed some data showing that, yes, you can, it will work. Traditionally, secular mindfulness classes have been 8 weeks long based on mindfulness-based stress reduction, who is the gold standard, the mother of all secular mindfulness classes. So when we looked at our data, we found that Koru was extremely effective. Mindfulness, self-compassion, perceived stress, and sleep all got better. And if you look at the effect sizes, they are large and medium. That is comparable or better to the effect sizes you see with longer mindfulness classes. And there are lots of studies showing that mindfulness is helpful. But what was important for us to see was that we were making a significant difference, and the effect was large or medium, which is a really good effect size. Many drugs on the market are on the market because they have a small effect size. So to have a short mindfulness program with this robust effect was really an important finding for us. Since the pandemic started, there have been a couple studies of Koru online in the pandemic. We never taught Koru online until the pandemic happened. People would say to us, can we teach Koru online? And we would say, no, we don't think so. We don't need data that it works. You should teach it in person. It's better. Yeah. So the pandemic taught us a lesson. So fortunately, there was some research done. These folks, Koru teachers at Georgia Tech, did a really lovely study. They measured a lot of different things, and I just pulled up this particular graph. You'll see that the dotted line is the control group. The dark line is the Koru group. Worry went down, rumination went down, positive affect went up, negative affect went down. Those are all good things. And then this study is pretty interesting because this is a study that did not intend to be a COVID study. These folks started out measuring Koru. They were going to see if the impact lasted for the full semester. And this was spring semester 2020. So the Koru class ended at spring break, and then the students never came back and their lives kind of fell apart, right? Y'all remember spring break of 2020. So in the top, what you're looking at is mindfulness. The second dot was where their mindfulness was at the end of their Koru class. And you see there's a big difference between the folks who took Koru and the control group. The bottom graph is the anxiety. And interestingly, the anxiety, the red line for the Koru folks stayed low, even though they had to transition to online learning and go home and have everything happen. So this is a really interesting demonstration that even that small amount of mindfulness that they had learned really helped these students cope with the early effects of the pandemic. All right. When you're teaching mindfulness to college students, it's hard. And the reason it's hard is because they are too busy. They'll tell you they don't have time. They're skeptical that it will be helpful to them, and they have a lot of assumptions about meditation and why they can't do it. And then if you do get them to try it, the first thing they're going to encounter is their busy mind. And then they're going to say, okay, see, I can't do it. My mind's too busy. So the solutions are you have to find that lowest effective dose. And that's what we spent a lot of time doing. 10 minutes a day for 4 weeks. And we were able to get those really good effects. So that's what we're going for. 10 minutes a day, 4 classes. Lots of structure and accountability. If they don't practice, they won't get the benefits. So we want to make sure they practice. Build community. This is critical. This may be the most important thing. I don't know. They sit in a group or they look on their Zoom screens and they share and they learn that, wow, your mind does exactly what my mind does. That's really helpful. I am not alone. And then with Koru, we really believe in having hands-on close mentoring by a teacher. Mindfulness apps are awesome, and we have an app, but we really think that unless you have a person, a capable, warm-hearted, grounded mindfulness teacher, it's hard to get very far with just your phone. So our curriculum, in brief, we try to pull that all together. And I'm not going to go into the details, all the details of it right now, but we have created a strategy that allows you to give the students what they need over 4 weeks. In addition, we have created, because they said, is there an app for that? A strategy for using technology to engage and mentor them. So our Koru teachers have a dashboard, and with their dashboard, they can monitor their students' Koru app. The Koru app keeps track of how long your student meditated every day, what meditation they used, and then they enter their reflections, their questions, and you respond to them and you coach them and you hold their hand and you tell them, hey, it's okay, you couldn't stop your thoughts. We're not trying to stop our thoughts. There's a gratitude river so they can see each other's gratitudes, and there's a community section where they build as a class. They grow a garden of mindfulness and they plant seeds of minutes of mindfulness. It's pretty cool. So one of the things that we learned really quickly with Koru, very soon with Koru, is that the students come in super anxious and nervous. If they go to the trouble to show up at a class, it's because they are needing help. They're in distress. So in our very first class, the first thing we do is teach them to calm their nervous system. And we do that by teaching them belly breathing. Then we teach them dynamic breathing, which is a way they can calm their nervous system while waking up without using caffeine. And then we teach them a body scan. And they learn all of that in the first class. So when they walk out that door, they feel better than when they walked in. Another meditation we teach in the second class has to do with what they told us over and over. And as I've already mentioned, was this problem of I cannot stop my thoughts. I can't do this. I can't stop my thoughts. Their breath, sounds, body sensations were not enough of an anchor for them. So we started using a Gatha. And I think we have enough time to practice this Gatha. So let's do a little bit of practice right now. Give you all a little bit of experience if you haven't used a Gatha before. This is one by Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a much loved meditation teacher who passed away earlier this year. So with a Gatha, you link your breath to these phrases. So as you breathe, you follow along with these phrases. So as you breathe in, you say silently to yourself, I know I am breathing in. And as you breathe out, you say silently to yourself, I know I am breathing out. So I'm going to lead you through this. You can look at the words on your screen if you want to. You don't have to, because I'm going to give you the words. And we'll just see what you notice. But the idea is you're linking these words to your breath and you're anchoring your awareness on these words and your breath together. All right? So back into our mindfulness position. If it's comfortable for you, settle your awareness on your breath. Find your breath. And then link your breathing to these words. I know I am breathing in. I know I am breathing out. I calm my body and my mind. I smile. I dwell in the present moment. I know it is a precious moment. I know I am breathing in. I know I am breathing out. I calm my body and my mind. I smile. I dwell in the present moment. I know it is a precious moment. I know I am breathing in. I know I am breathing out. I calm my body and my mind. I smile. I dwell in the present moment. I know it is a precious moment. Now carry on repeating those words silently to yourself. You can look at the screen if it's helpful. When you say I smile, just play with putting a smile on your face. See what you notice. For the last minute, if you want, you can shorten the phrases down to 1 or 2 words. In, out, calming, smiling, present moment, precious moment. Carry on just for another minute, linking words to your breath. If your eyes are closed, you can open them. Returning to our digital connection.
Holly, I'll just jump in and say for a moment that, I've taught Koru Mindfulness curriculum at UNC for more than 5 years now, and the Gatha approach is indeed one of the most loved and used by the students. There is this, as you see in the picture that you show here, a dog chewing on a bone. There is this sense of giving your mind something to do, but what it's doing is bringing your attention to the present moment. So it's a very effective, from the feedback I've gotten from students, a very effective approach.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. That's certainly what we hear. They need a little handhold to hang on to the bank. Thanks. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and finish on up here, so we have time for questions. Just want to let you all know the curriculum. It has 3 components, and when we train teachers, you're trained to teach all 3. Koru Basic is the first 4-week class. Koru 2.0 is our advanced class. And then there's a half-day mindfulness retreat for students. That's the 3rd component. There's a look at our teacher dashboard in our app. That's the practice log you see on the app. It's a calendar, and there's a blue dot if they meditated, and it depends what color, how long they meditated. This is our training program. You apply, you attend a workshop, you start teaching with our support, you submit a portfolio, and then you're a part of our large community. We've trained over 1,000 people in 12 countries. So it's awesome. We're planting lots of seeds. This is something, Mike, that we may talk about a little bit later, about creating a sustainable mindfulness Koru culture on your campus. So I will move on with that for now. But, mindfulness is not about just stress management, y'all. It's about something more. It's about heart and feeling and meaning, and that is what our young people are craving. And it's what the world needs. More connection, less divisiveness. And I will say that Gen Z, they're amazing, and they can change the world. So I say we help them out. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Thank you all so much for your attention.
That was really wonderful, Holly. Thank you for sharing those perspectives and the research and the practice and the hope. Thanks for sharing the hope with us too, that these kinds of approaches can cultivate. Now is the moment for folks who have questions to go ahead and ask your questions. Again, we're going to try to use this Q&A format. So if you want to type your question, if you have any, into the Q&A box there, I will share those with Holly, and we'll do our best to address your questions. So let's just see if anyone has any questions. We'll do a little mindful pause here and let them collect their thoughts and share any that they might have in the Q&A box. If they are still collecting their thoughts and have anything to share, I might give them more time by asking you a question. So could you just walk us through a little bit more about what the teacher training program involves for Koru certification?
Sure. So we have a few prerequisites. We know, and if you practice mindfulness at all, you know you can't teach mindfulness if you don't practice mindfulness. So you have to have had a mindfulness practice for at least 6 months, been through some formal class, and that could be our Koru Fundamentals class. We offer a 5-week class for folks who are interested in becoming Koru teachers. And at some point, either before or during your Koru training, we ask you to attend a 3-day mindfulness retreat. So if you can tick those boxes, then you send in an application, we review it, and when you're accepted, you're given an option to sign up for one of our trainings. We now do online trainings, but we are doing our first in-person training since COVID this summer in Durham, and we would love to have y'all come see us in Durham for a real live in-person training. I'm so excited to be in community again. So you go through the training and then you start teaching. You're ready to teach when you leave. We give you scripts. We give you this dashboard that has everything you need. And you teach 3 Koru basic courses, and you attend 4 online supervisions with us. And then you submit a portfolio. And in the portfolio, we ask you to read some books and watch some videos and write a short essay, a number of things you do. And once that is all done, you have a year to do that all. We review your portfolio, and then you're part of our community of certified teachers, and you can keep teaching. Plant seeds, plant seeds. That's what we do. We plant seeds. So that's how it works.
That's great. Thanks, Holly. We have 2 questions here. One is, and I think I might be able to address this one if I understand the question, is the retreat in person? And I think what that question is about is the retreat requirement for Koru certification. Is it a requirement to have that 3-day retreat in person? And I think probably a lot has changed, right, with COVID, and some retreats are not in person, they are remote. And does Koru accept those kinds of retreat experiences?
We do. We have, we had to, and folks needed to retreat, and they had to retreat in their home. So we absolutely do, but we are a little particular about the kind of retreat. So it really needs to be a mindfulness retreat taught by an experienced mindfulness teacher, and there are plenty of beautiful ones out there. And we actually have a spreadsheet of different places who offer these retreats. But now that we can go in person, I think a lot of us are going to try and go in person, but we'll continue to accept online retreats. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Here's another question. Thank you so much for this incredible webinar. I use, quote, centering in at the start of every class I teach, and have noticed a huge difference in my students' anxiety levels, engagement, and participation during class. What do you do when strong negative emotions or experiences come up for students during meditation?
So this is a really great question. Thank you for asking it. I find it comes up all the time. And so one, I will say that in Koru, Um, it almost never happens. So I like to reassure teachers. I'm a psychiatrist. I taught Koru in the context of a counseling center. So we had a higher levels of stress and anxiety. Koru is designed to be a very tight, supportive curriculum. We don't meditate for more than 5 to 10 minutes at a stretch. And we give people a lot of permission, we use a lot of trauma-informed language. If it's uncomfortable for you, open your eyes. You know your body best. You do what's comfortable for you. And typically, the students do that really well, even students who have pretty high levels of anxiety. However, if someone does have a difficult time, we encourage our teachers to do whatever you do on your campus with a student who has distress. Like who do you refer them to? How do you help them? You can talk to the student after class, give them referral sources, ask if you can be helpful. And, I've taught thousands of students Koru, and maybe once or twice people have come to me afterwards and commented they had a problem. So it can happen, but it's really rare. And the curriculum controls for it. And then, you have resources on campus to deal with students who really are needing more support.
If I can jump in a little bit on that one too, trauma sensitive mindfulness is kind of an emerging area now, and it does seem to have found its way into the way that Koru is delivered in the ways that you said, Holly. And as a psychiatrist, of course, this is out front for you. But for some of us who don't have that kind of a background, it can come as a little bit of a shock when a student expresses an anxious reaction to the breath. And I noticed when you were leading us through that initial meditation, there was emphasis on finding different anchoring points, and I think that's been successful for me too, to help students maybe avert that kind of reaction, that kind of reactivity, because they're finding something they're comfortable with that they can anchor their attention on. The other thing is that we talk about, and this might be helpful for folks out there who are trying this out in their classes, that there is a window of tolerance that we all have, and all of our windows are wider or narrower depending on where we're at right now and our past experience and so forth. So bringing their attention to that reality, that we have a window of tolerance, and encouraging them to move within that space, and when they feel ready, to push the boundary a little bit, but not to just go screaming over it into the place where they're in a lot of discomfort and might be triggered. That gives them a little bit more agency, a little bit more opportunity to exercise choice in their practice of mindfulness. That's been my experience in the way that I've been teaching it. Do you find that to be similar, or do you have other thoughts about that, Holly?
No, Mike, that's beautifully said. And we talk about there are these 3 zones. So the window of tolerance is a beautiful metaphor. We use that a lot. But we also talk about the zones of comfort, stretch, and overwhelm. And mindfulness helps people manage their nervous systems so that they have better capacity to regulate themselves and stay within the comfort or stretch zone. If they're a little bit uncomfortable and they're moving into their stretch zone, that's where learning occurs. So we're not trying to keep them always in their comfort zone, but we certainly want to help them stay out of their overwhelm zone.
That's great. Thank you for that. I have one more question here, actually 2. I see that Koru is a contained course-based program, but have you done any kind of integration of this model with existing courses? For example, I start each of my courses with what I call a moment of focus. Do you have any advice about that model or any thoughts about it?
Great question. So 2 things come to mind. One, about half of our Koru teachers are faculty, and many of them integrate the whole 4-week Koru class into their semester-long class. Depending on what they're teaching, they just do the whole curriculum, which is really interesting, and it seems to work really well. The other thing that I think you're asking about is this idea of opening a class with, like the last person said, centering in, or you're talking about a moment of focus. And I think that can be extremely helpful. I'm guessing that what you all have found is what most of us have found, is that some students are really open to that and engage in it, and then other students are trying to scroll on their phone while there's the moment of focus. So I think that the professor is always kind of having to manage that. And my feeling is, even if it's not something that all students love, it can still be worthwhile for the students who are willing to participate and engage. And I think it's really helpful for some students.
Thank you. We have one more question, which I think is a great question to end the Q&A on. Pretty straightforward. I can answer this one. Will a recording of this webinar be available for us to share with colleagues and administrators? And the answer to your question is yes. All of you who have registered will receive a link to the recording, but also Holly has offered to put the recording on the Koru website too, so that you'll be able to, you and your colleagues and friends and so forth will be able to access it that way as well. Holly, did you want to add anything to that?
No, okay. No. I just want to thank everyone for showing up and hanging out with us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I agree. It's wonderful to have everybody join us, because we all recognize that there's something going on out there for the last couple of years, and well before it actually, in terms of in terms of students' encounters with anxiety and with that uncertainty. I think that really is at the bottom of everything. So I want to thank you personally, Holly, and on behalf of UNC and all the rest of the folks who are interested in this kind of thing, for sharing your valuable time with us today. I'm so excited that we are planting a seed with this work we're doing in the webinar, and also with the opportunity to share the recording with other folks too. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike. And
now what we'll do is we'll open this up to UNC folks who are in our participants, in our group of participants. I do not know at this point how many, if any, are UNC folks, but if you don't mind lingering a little longer, and the folks who are not affiliated with UNC, I want to wish you the best rest of your day, and enjoy. If you are in a place where there is sunshine, enjoy it. And thank you so much for joining us today. So I'll pause a little bit and let the UNC folks stick around, and the other folks can get on with their days. Thank you. Let's see what we got here for participants remaining. I'm going to stop the recording, because